You're allowed to outgrow. People without explaining yourself. There comes a moment in many lives that feels quiet but irreversible. It's not dramatic. There's no argument, no betrayal, no final conversation that wraps everything up neatly. You simply realize something has changed. The conversations feel heavier, the connection feels thinner, and the version of you that once fit so easily in certain spaces no longer does. This is often how outgrowing people begins, not with anger, but with awareness. And yet, this kind of change is rarely met with understanding. We're taught that distance requires justification, that stepping back must come with a reason everyone agrees with, that if someone is confused or hurt by your growth, you owe them an explanation detailed enough to make them comfortable. But growth doesn't always come with language. Sometimes you don't leave because something went wrong. You leave because something went right within you. As you change, your needs change. Your tolerance shifts. What once felt normal begins to feel misaligned, and that can be deeply uncomfortable, especially if you've built an identity around being accessible, agreeable, or emotionally available to everyone. Outgrowing someone doesn't mean you think you're better than them. It doesn't mean you've judged their path, and it doesn't erase the meaning they once had in your life. It simply means you are no longer the same person who needed that dynamic to survive. Still, guilt often follows. Guilt for pulling away without a clear explanation. Guilt for not having a good enough reason. Guilt for choosing yourself in a way that feels invisible to others. We confuse kindness with self-abandonment. We believe that if someone doesn't understand our boundaries, we must soften them, that if someone feels hurt by our growth, we must slow ourselves down. But growth doesn't wait for permission, and explanations don't always bring peace. Sometimes explaining yourself only opens the door to negotiation, to being talked out of your instincts, to being told you're wrong for feeling what you feel. Not everyone is meant to come with you into the next version of your life, and that doesn't make anyone a villain. Some relationships are seasonal, some connections exist to teach us something specific, and then quietly end. The mistake we make is believing that endings must always be loud to be valid. Silent endings are still endings. Distance can be an act of care, for yourself and sometimes for others too. When you stay in spaces that drain you, you don't become more compassionate, you become resentful, disconnected, less present. Choosing to leave quietly can be the most honest option. You're allowed to stop showing up where you no longer feel aligned. You're allowed to protect your energy without explaining every internal shift. You're allowed to change without bringing everyone along for the process. Growth is not cruelty, but it often looks unkind to those who benefit from you staying the same. That doesn't mean you're wrong. It means you've reached a point where familiarity is no longer enough. You may never get the relief of being fully understood, and that can be painful. But peace doesn't always come from being understood. Sometimes it comes from being aligned. You don't owe anyone the old version of yourself. You don't owe access to people who no longer respect your boundaries, your pace, or your becoming. And you don't need to explain your evolution for it to be real. Outgrowing people is not a failure of loyalty. It's often a sign of honesty, a sign that you're listening to yourself. And that kind of listening, quiet, firm, and compassionate, is worth protecting. Please subscribe for more.